Welcome back to the Live by Heart Today show number 84. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the world we found ourselves in. We'll talk a little bit about science. We'll talk a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and we talk a lot about transformation.
Live by Heart Today is brought to you by
wearehistorically.com. Conscious Human Apparel.
Raise your vibration and energize your life with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks to deepen meditations and empower self-healing. Get your vibrational sound tools for personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Hello, I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, medical intuitive and coherence coach. This show is in our pilgrimage series, and today's theme is heart intent. With me for our heart to heart is my guest, Dr. Walter, homeopath. Hi, Walter. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed our shows about heart, and in particular this week we're discussing intent, which is a great follow-up to last week's show about the language of the heart. And I think some language is overemphasized in many relationships and in many cultures. And the truth is, it's what's behind the language that really tells us the truth of what's being said. Do you have some experience with that you'd like to share with us?
Okay, I'd like to go back to a bit of physiology again to start off with, and to say that language is a pretty late development when it comes to human evolution, which I don't entirely believe in. I think the word's a bit of a misnomer. But in terms of human development, language is a very late development. Bodies communicate before language communicates. And in particular, what we're talking about now is what the heart communicates is what the heart intends. And I want to say from the outset how much I have learnt from the work of Lynn McTaggart. Her third book, I think it is called The Power of Eight. And she's done pioneering work in terms of understanding how intention works. And she's made it very practical. And I'll be so bold as to say that miracles have indeed happened. And anyone who wants to go and read up about it can do so. I recommend her work. I could start off by saying that the heart doesn't have an agenda. The heart doesn't have a strategy. The heart intends, often without the approval or the cooperation of our verbal minds, our rational minds. The heart does what it does. It's a good idea to get in tune with it and to find out, but sometimes it's going to take a slowing down and a long look and a much better recognition and realization of oneself to get to that point where you're prepared to cooperate with the heart rather than work against it to achieve an agenda which has got nothing to do with it. That might be a good place to start.
You're speaking very truthfully, I think, because most people are so foreign. The language of the heart is so foreign, and the intent is just not something they're accustomed to tuning into. However, there are some practices, some practical things that people do and have experience with that will help them get in greater touch with their heart. And that would be talking about their relationship with their pets. Now, why would a relationship with one's pet allow you to develop and understand your heart?
Well, quite simply, I would say that there exists the possibility of truthful communication, truthful language between you and your pet. The word certainly won't convey it. I mean, there might be an instruction, there might be an invitation, but that's not where it's at.
Right.
The animal would understand the invitation before it's even uttered. The animal would certainly feel the admonition before it's said. And the ears will go down and the tail will go down and all the rest of it. And perhaps not one word has been said, but the matter has been felt, and it's been felt truthfully. It makes me wonder if an animal will ever have the ability to be cocky back if you're being unreasonably truthful. It's a different thought. But the fact that bodies and hearts are truthful, and language is often a pretense or a conceit.
Exactly.
So there's that difference between the rational language and the bodily communication and the heartfelt realization.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to mention that science is beginning to notice that, because they have stated that an individual who is stroking their pet does experience a slowed heart rate. So there is definitely heart communication going on between people and their animals.
Yeah, no, I think it's been shown without a doubt. There's no debate about that. The heart resonance is a very real thing.
Right, but people don't understand it. The point I'm making is that science is now talking about the changes that happen, the communication between pets, but they talk about it with regard to like stress. Oh, having a pet reduces your stress, but it's more than that. And I think that's a significant point to make, that it actually is directly affecting one's heart.
Yes. Yes, I was reading something just the other day that was pointing out now in connection with music, that within minutes of listening to music, the heart changes and develops a resonance with the music that's being appreciated.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps people are not aware of the studies that have been done with playing music to plants and how plants respond accordingly. That certain music encourages growth, luscious plants. Certain music does absolutely nothing to them, and other kinds of music. I'm not sure if I'll go as far as to saying that it doesn't do the plant any good, but certainly there's a great discrepancy between what music does and doesn't do to plants in respect of what it is.
Right, and
yeah, that level of intentionality, which is so crucial to how we understand what is emitted again from the heart. And I keep on tickling my own brain with the notion that, is it real or is it metaphoric? Because I keep on suggesting that it's metaphoric, because the heart is the organ, but the experience is certainly real.
Yeah, the from my perspective, and I'm glad you brought up this point. From my perspective, the heart, yes, is an organ, and it has at least about 40,000 neurons. And wherever there is a cluster of neurons concentrated in an area, there is an intelligence. There is a level of knowing or understanding. Just like the intestines, also, that's a cluster of neurons, and everybody knows about their gut instinct or their gut response, but nobody's talking about the response of the heart. And it's important. Yes, it's an organ. And we talk a lot about it metaphorically, but I really truly believe that it's that's a physical reality, and there are physical components to it.
I've seen it referred to as that the body has three brains: the one in the head, the one which is the heart, and the one which is the gut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one that rules them all is the heart, I think.
There's quite a lot of science that shows this. If one goes to look at the work that the heart math people, the Heart Math Institute, is doing, you're going to find a lot of science being shown there, which is good science, indisputable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love their science. Yeah. In fact, one of the things they mention is that the heart sends many more signals to the brain than the brain sends information to the heart.
Yes.
So that's pretty significant.
Yes. And I think that people whose work link with an understanding of the chakras, which is not always well understood in the Western context, but which is pretty widely used globally, that the heart chakra is basically the filter through which everything moves, which makes sense to me. When I think chakra, I don't think spinning wheels. I think actually places where the body feels in great big clumps. So there's not much feeling here, but there's a great deal of feeling here. Virtually all the feeling here, a great deal more elsewhere in the body, but those 7 places, I think, coincide with nexes, if that's the plural word, of feltness, of emotionality, or sensation.
And the chakras do correspond to lots of neurons, concentration of neurons. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And I think if one wanted a practical example, just try this. either in a room with someone else or even someone far away, someone who is known to you. Simply spend at least half an hour, perhaps an hour if you have the time, or as a routine on a daily basis, every now and again, sending them good vibes. And just see what the net result is, because it can be really surprising. When I say, good vibes, the clearer the intention is within yourself, that to send them peace, to send them, but it's the emission again. You're actually emitting something that's real, and that can be picked up even over a long space. It can be picked up and experienced in a reciprocal way, and feedback on that is, as I said, can be quite dramatic and quite exciting.
So it sounds like you've practiced that. What kinds of feedback have you gotten when you practice sending good intentions to someone?
Oh, well, the time-honored way, I think I've said this before as well, is that if you simply hold someone in mind intentionally, in other words, you simply are aware, and you're happy to be aware of them, and you would like them to be aware of the happiness in being aware of them, they would easily contact you within 12 or 24 hours.
Yeah.
What about you? How are things? Yes.
Yeah, I think that's remarkable. That happens to me frequently.
Yes. Yes. In a more proximal way, when I practice my mode of energy healing, it's called biofocusing. If you simply go as wordless as possible and pay attention to that body in front of you to see what it requires, it will pick up what it requires in terms of what needs to be healed. Sometimes physiological, sometimes a mixture of what is felt and that which is physiological. But again, it's an attention thing as well as an intention thing. There's a remarkable link between attention and intention, especially when it comes to heart. You don't intend just from the brain. You might articulate that which you want to intend, but the action of it is more heart-based than anything else.
I'd love for you to spend more time talking about biofocusing at some point, because I think it's a modality that people need to be made aware of. They need to experience it, and will really benefit the world as a whole. And I think it's not talked about well enough. It's not well understood in lots of the medical fields. So at some point we should discuss it more often.
Okay.
With regard to heart and intention, I'd like to wrap in the idea of intention and using words to communicate. So heart language, and using our ability to formulate ideas with our mind, but actually convey what we're experiencing in our heart, is a skill. And you've mentioned writing poetry for quite some time. And I'd also like to talk about everyday communication, because not everyone can access their heart as in regard to like writing poetry, like others who are skilled like yourself, and our producer has that skill as well, or heart expressions through music. It's also not common for people to be able to do that. But to be able to express one's heart with words and feelings and intention on a daily basis, I think is a great skill that anyone can learn. What do you suggest?
I would suggest that the basis for this is to learn truthfulness as best as you can. That instead of saying the polite things, instead of saying the given things or the expected things, if one would use language with as much felt truthfulness as possible, there'd be a lot less confusion and a lot more clarity in this world. And that in expressing both the kind things and the clear things. And if one is really angry, then it's okay to say so. I remember one day being incredibly angry with what a bank had caused me to experience. And of course, there was no one to be angry with because it's anonymous. But I remember standing outside and thinking, no, I'm actually going to go and to mention to someone. So I went inside and I said to the cashier, it is not your fault, but I'm angry. Convey this to whoever needs to hear it. And I can remember looking at me, and there was a moment of really intense enjoyment between the two of us, because something was being said that needed to be said, and it wasn't aimed with any malice at her, but
Yes.
it was real, and it was good because it was real. So in the same way that that anything else can be expressed, I think that what we say, the negative stuff, shouldn't be avoided. If it's really felt, simply say it without malice, without the intent to harm or hurt, and it'll go a long way. So by the same token, I think that it's necessary to avoid superficial kindness, which some cultures, I think, promote. I don't want to give examples there, but some cultures promote that, and I think it's better to avoid that, so that really felt kindness can be experienced at the level which it should be experienced. Because that's good for you too.
Yes, and good for the recipient also. I'm reminded of recently speaking with a gentleman who worked at the appliance store, where I had purchased several appliances for my new house. And I was mentioning that there was something wrong with the oven, and I had brought pictures, and I was telling him that I didn't think that the people who delivered the appliances had been as careful as they could have been. And I stated, some supportive examples. And the man was so generous. He said, well, why don't I get you a new part? We'll buy it and we'll have it delivered. And I said that wasn't necessary to have a new part. But I just wanted him to know that I wasn't happy about, how the situation had happened. And he said to me, you know what? I think it's right for me to replace this part because you have been kind. And there are many people who come in here and who are not kind, and they yell, and I'm retiring on Saturday. So he was retiring because people were constantly giving him negative feedback and speaking in ways that just were not helpful. And yes, being angry happens, but to take it out on people has very negative consequences on their well-being, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so your example of speaking to the cashier was perfect, because I'm wondering if people actually know that that's an option.
Yes. And it's also a way, if you take the time to get in touch with what your own heart intends, I think it's a useful exercise, because most of the time we're just responding without doing something intentionally, which is a matter of expressing, but without malice, and then knowing what it is that you want to express. It becomes quite an art form, because it involves both words and tone and pace. You don't want to go out and rush at people.
Yeah.
So it's a manner of imparting, which I think it's a skill to learn. I can't remember where I learned it. Perhaps it came from watching movies. Al Pacino, I think, and his way of speaking. But you can, once you learn that the voice is there to express the heart, there's a good connection to be made there.
Yeah, I thought of an example of expressing intention with a 2-word phrase that I've used before, and the 2 words are "get out." And I've used those 2 words in several different ways. One way is I would say "get out," which is conveying disbelief. I'd be saying, "Really? That's remarkable." Another way I use the term is if there's some danger, and I'll say to my kids, "Get out, get out, get out, get out, get out." Like, get out of the way because, something is falling, Yes. And I'm using the same words, but there's a real different intention. And of course, the third way, which is get out, which is remove yourself from my presence. Yeah. And it's the same words in each case. But for sure, the intention behind it, right? The message. Yeah, the message. And so it's a real skill. And I want people to understand that it's a skill that can be learned, and they can understand how to listen, not just to the words, but to the intention behind the words that are being used. And we'll come back in a short little while and discuss that at more length.
Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
I'm Dawn Spiegelberg, a posture specialist and coherence coach. We hold responsibilities on our shoulders, and when our responsibilities become too great, we begin to bend over with the load. And that load actually begins to curve our back, and in this portion of our back is our sense of commitments. So maintain alignment with who you are and the responsibilities that you actually should embrace. Contact me today to align your body, align your mind, and align your beliefs.
Raise your vibration and energize your life with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks that deepen meditations and empower self-healing. Get your vibrational sound tools for personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Welcome to the Live by Heart Today show. We're here with my wonderful guest, Dr. Walter, and we're talking about heart intention. It isn't discussed much that I know of in the world, and words mean something, and the way in which we express those words means even more.
The body is a whole thing.
Yeah.
Linguistically, we can divide it up into lip, brain, tongue, larynx, pharynx, stomach. But when we speak, the body is speaking from all of it. And I think that's a point that's often missed. It's fascinating the way in which people use their voices when they are playing roles, quite unconsciously. Whether it's a sales pitch or a political speech or a preacher's rhetoric or a teacher's style of impartation. That's the unconscious dropping into how we use the voice. But so when we use it intentionally, that would link in with understanding what the heart's intent is as well. And I think it's probably pertinent to note here that the heart's intention is mostly, I think, unconscious. We actually have to bring our conscious minds to the heart's unconsciousness, which is the more relevant source of intention. Because the rational mind would have an agenda, would have a sense of purpose. But what the heart wants to bring about, which could relate to our calling, our sense of living purpose, when we start paying attention to that and start telling others, I think the voice would behave in an interesting way, and that the hearer would automatically note the shift in the voice's behavior. Again, a book which I found very helpful is one called Full Voice by Barbara McAfee. It covers many aspects of how to use the voice intentionally. So I would recommend that one as well.
You're reminding me of something I noticed recently, and voice and understanding vocalizations is an amazing skill to develop. And there's one other thing I'm realizing that's important. And you touched on it a little bit when you mentioned in attention, which is different than intention, right? But attention. And I've noticed when my children get home from school, if I'm busy in the kitchen, washing, clearing the dishwasher, something, then my children tend to scatter from the kitchen. But if I'm sitting, so the last few days I've been sitting and taking notes and writing letters to people, I noticed if I'm sitting, my 16-year-old will actually sit with me and then share stories about what happened during the day. And this has been amazing because he's taking an opportunity to express himself. I'm looking in his eyes. I'm hearing what happened during his day. And it's really endearing, the two of us, and I love it. And so what we're doing with our physical body is just as an important component to what we're doing with our voice and the words that we use.
I think the voice is a great simplifier, because when we talk about heart things, it can sound deep and murky and difficult to understand. So a very short cut to the heart is just to listen to the voice, and we'll soon make up our minds as to whether this voice is saying something from the heart or whether it's just saying something. I'm always fascinated by listening to other people's conversations, not because of what they're saying, but just because how they seem to be satisfying some group need by talking to each other in the way that they are. They're happy. Whatever it is that they're talking about has no relevance, maybe. They're just simply happy to swap voices. And that's a reflection of what is happening, with the heart as well. It's emotional. Here again, I want to refer back to something physiological, because when we talk about emotions, we tend to separate them from physiological stuff. But if we talk about what we feel rather than emotions, because what we feel and what we sense are related, and it is that sense of something which impels the voice into action. So whether it's a cry of danger, or whether it's a heartfelt reaching out for whatever reason, or whether it's sincerely meant encouragement, the sense of that is not a moralized emotion. It's something that the body wants to do, has to do, needs to do. So in exactly the same way that a mother will talk to the baby, with the maternal language. I suppose fathers could do it too. I'm not trying to be gender specific here, but specifically, that kind of communication is natural. It's felt. It's not a morally right or wrong thing, which is what I'm trying to point out. The voice does what it does, just as the heart does what it does. And when the voice links directly with the heart, because there's a natural congruence of some sort happening at that moment, we don't think about it. It happens, but it's a shortcut to understanding what the heart is imparting.
You're describing coherence.
Am I? Okay.
Yes, you're describing coherence, and coherence is unified wholeness. So it's the heart and the voice and the mind also, all of them expressing themselves.
I came across something recently which said that it was a story about a doctor who found himself without any medications, any instruments. It was a woman. And I think it was a prison setting. And it made me want to sit down and weep. It said, so she used her voice to heal the people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And it reminds me that one of our sponsors is tuning forks. And that's vibration. And what's amazing is that we are designed with our own set of tuning forks, right? Our voice emotes sound, and that sound can be healing.
Yes. And we can control that to a large extent.
Yeah.
Now that's a good example of fruitful intention.
I'm reminded that I believe it was Deepak Chopra that said, between stimulus and response, there's a moment. And that moment, no matter how close the stimulus and response appear to be, that moment is one that we can capture, that we can make a choice in, whether to have a vocalization that is healing and expressing beneficial, encouraging words to someone, or they can be sharp and cutting. And
I think this is important in everyday communication, because we certainly don't pay much attention to it. And yet every single sound that we utter is important, because it adds or subtracts. It adds or subtracts to the sense of healing generally.
So in our last few moments, today's discussion was about heart intent, and in having conversations, where our heart can be expressing positive things, our heart can also express more negative or more painful intentions. And so I think what I recall you saying at the beginning was that we be truthful, so that neither is right or wrong, it just is. Can you talk a little bit about that, about being faced with perhaps more difficult heart intentions?
Yeah, I've often thought about what the notion of truth could be, because it's a notoriously elusive notion. But the more I attach it to physiology, the more tangible it becomes. Because if one feels X or Y, then that's what one feels. So then the question becomes: is it worth paying attention to this or not? And when you ask that kind of question, I think that this could lead to a greater awareness of what the heart is saying. I needn't pay attention to this. This is not important. So then, what is important? And if you're talking to yourself like that, surely you're going to get somewhere. And if you're talking to someone else like that, this is not important. No, that's not important. So what is important? What do you say is important? That sort of conversation immediately takes you to a place of mutual truthfulness, which is a better idea than abstract truthfulness. Because I think typically we think of truthfulness or truth being an abstract thing. Whereas if we tie it to physiology, communication will soon hone it down to something tangible, something graspable, which is evident in a relationship, which talking would indicate. What is felt would emerge, and what is felt that could be shared would emerge. And if it's shared and it's agreed upon, this is more like truth than a philosophical notion of what truth could be.
Beautiful. So just like you edit your poetry, you should edit communication, really get to the heart of the matter. Is that true?
Yes. Yes. I'm wondering if it takes a friend to do that, if it takes anybody to do that. Because sometimes friends pop up quite spontaneously in strange places. And you can have a moment of truthful communication with a perfect stranger, which is quite weird. But it tends to happen, and happen more than one would expect.
That for me is actually fairly commonplace.
Uh-huh.
And not everyone is capable of it, of course, between gas attendants and police officers. It takes all sorts of people, and not everyone is capable of real, truthful, heart-to-heart communication, and that's okay.
Yes, that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Walter. And thanks to everyone for being with us today.
Well,
if you're watching, please let us know. We want to hear from you. So tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. For more information about how you can live by heart, please go to livebyhearttoday.com. Like and follow this page so you don't miss any of our programs. We're here every Thursday at 4:44 Pacific time. From our heart to yours, we're creating a better tomorrow because we live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of Live by Heart Today.
And thank you to our sponsors for making the show possible. Hooray! Thank you, We Are Historically, for your conscious human apparel. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Level up your life and raise your vibration with specialized Fibonacci tuning forks. Get your vibrational sound tools for your personal enhancement at energybodytuners.com.
Thank you for joining us. Have a happy always. View more episodes on our website.
Is there something you want to cover in particular?
The connection between voice and heart is really interesting. It's a big subject.